right. Lindsay, are you moderately comfortable?
I'm good. Yep.
You're good? All right. Ready to get started?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Because we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Welcome into the SECU Daily Planet Theater. My name is Chris Smith. I work in education here at the museum, and I am your host for our programs Inside the Globe, and I'll be your host today for Dino Dig Live, one of the most interesting and exciting programs and unique programs that I think we get to offer here at the Museum of Natural Sciences. Joining me today for Dino Dig Live is the head of paleontology here at the Museum of Natural Sciences, the leader of all of our teams who are doing incredible work studying ancient life here in the research labs. That's the Dueling Dinosaur exhibit and the SECU Dino Lab right here on the first floor of the Nature Research Center, as well as up on the third floor in the Paleontology Research Lab and beyond, also at NC State University. Everybody say a big welcome to Dr. Lindsay Zano.
Hi, everyone. Hi from New Mexico.
Hey, Lindsay, how are things in New Mexico?
You know, Chris, it's been, 2 weeks since we checked in with you. Things are going great. We're getting a lot of work done out here, and we've had some interesting weather. We had 3 days of thunder, lightning storms, couple days of hail. That was pretty exciting. Some flash flooding around here. And it's getting pretty hot since we last talked to you. We've gotten to about 98 degrees or so already in early June. So the weather's keeping us on our toes, but we've got lots of fossils we've been digging up since we last spoke as well.
Flash floods and then extreme heat. That's the life of a paleontologist.
Yeah. It's good. It keeps the monotony down.
Yeah, I would. Lots more excitement than just finding and digging up dinosaurs. That's amazing stuff. So I'll remind everybody, if you're here in the globe with me, in just a few minutes, you'll be able to ask your questions for Dr. Zano about the work that's going on out west. And if you're watching online on YouTube on the museum's channel, you can type your questions and thoughts into the chat as well. I've got that pulled up so that I can share your questions with Dr. Zano directly into the program here inside the theater. But Lindsay, give us sort of an update. Last time we heard about some of the dig sites that you were starting on and some that you were continuing to work on. Tell us how things have gone the last 2 weeks and where things stand.
Well, I think, Chris, one of the interesting things about field work in paleontology and what we do out here is that we have to make decisions about what we're going to dig up and what we're not going to dig up. And people may not realize that not everything we find we decide to, open a quarry for. So a few years ago, a graduate student at NC State found the shoulder bones and upper arm bone of an ankylosaur dinosaur. So that's one of these tank-like dinosaurs with all the armor covering the body. And it was sort of sticking out of this really gigantic, about 10 to 12 meter high hillside. So just a cliff, 12-meter cliff, and then at the base of that cliff is this really nice bone from this ankylosaur sticking out. So we came out here about a couple weeks ago to try and figure out, is that a site that's worth all that effort? Because it would probably take us about 3 weeks with a team of, say, 12 people to remove enough of that overburden just to get to the bone layer. And so for the first week and a half we've been out here, we've been kind of poking around at the base of that hill, trying to figure out, is that a quarry we want to open? And it turns out there's some really nice bone there. So we've collected most of the pelvis. There's a bunch of ribs. There's some vertebrae and some toe bones and other things. And the bone is really exquisite. But we're now down to just 5 people here for the next week or so. We had a class from NC State with 6 undergrads who came out to learn how to do paleo field work, and a bunch of colleagues out here when we last spoke. So we had a big team of about 14 people, but we're kind of down to 5 people now. So I think we've collected all we can collect from that site for this year, but at least we now know that next year it's going to be something we're going to have to tear the hill down to get at.
Wow, that's incredible. You said like a 10, 12 meter tall hillside. But to get at the
Yeah,
fossils, you've got to move the whole hill.
yeah, and it's hard rock. We spent about 4 or 5 days rock sawing through some sandstone. There's a big sandstone lens right on top of the nice soft mudstone layer that the bones are in. So it's really a lot of that sandstone is binded together with iron, and so we're using diamond bladed cut-off saws to cut that sandstone into blocks and then backhammer it off, and it's a really slow process. So we wanted to make sure that this discovery would be worth the amount of time and effort and expense it will take to do a full excavation there. And now we know that that's something next year's team gets to do.
I mean, incredible that you were able to find this in the first place. Can you tell us a little bit about how this graduate student at NC State actually first found these fossils, and maybe more broadly, how you find fossils out in this landscape?
Sure. Well, you can see some of the landscape behind me. You can see that these are badlands. So there's a lot of hills and exposed rock out here. There's not a lot of plant life. So you can see the stuff that's actually eroding out of the ground. And that's really important for finding fossils, because the way we find dinosaurs and other fossils is with our eyes. And we hike around all day. We get our GPSs and our radios, we break up and we scour the landscape, hiking around in the heat all day, looking for places where bone is actually popping out of the ground and eroding out of the ground. And that's something we call prospecting. And so we have permits to wander this area and prospect and look for places that we might have good skeletons. But the thing is, until you dig in, like we've just been talking about, you don't really know if it's one bone or a couple bones on the surface, or if there's actually a nice skeleton buried in the hill. So it's a lot of guesswork. It's a lot of grunt work. It's a lot of disappointment and frustration. And then sometimes you hit on something really exciting.
Do the fossils look very different from the surrounding rock and dirt? Are they easy to spot on the landscape in that case? Like you're walking around and you go, oh, that bright blue thing there, that's a fossil.
Well, that's a great question. It depends on where you are. So we work this one area in Utah called the Mustn't Touch It. So there's a lot of fossils in our lab that the visitors can see by looking through the windows of our lab. And in the Mustn't Touch It, the rock is gray and the bones are jet black. And so it's pretty easy to spot those fossils. Here in this rock formation, it's called the Menifee Formation. It's actually pretty difficult. In fact, we've had one quarry down below me, which is probably a little too far for you to see, but there's some NC State graduate students down there digging on a ceratopsian skull. And the bones are so close in color and texture to the rock that it's really difficult to tell them apart. So it depends on where you go, but here in the Menifee, it can be quite difficult to actually spot the difference between bone and rock.
In that case, I think my next question is, why look for fossils there in the Menifee Formation then, if they can be so hard to find, versus spending more time in places like the Mustn't Touch It, where maybe it's a little easier?
Yeah, I mean, this is the $1,000,000 question. Why are we out here at all? And I mentioned to you that in the Menifee, most of what we find ends up not being great. And that's all about the original environment that the Menifee represents. So where these dinosaurs were living, what was the likelihood that their skeletons would get buried as opposed to them decomposing on the surface and their bones getting spread all over the place. And so this wasn't a great place to bury dinosaurs. It was too far. It was like a delta plane, essentially. And it was not a lot of sediment coming in that could bury whole skeletons, for example. So like we have these beautiful dinosaurs in the dino lab that visitors can see. They're fully articulated skeletons, right? Really gorgeous material. And that's fantastic. But out here in the Menifee, we don't really get that very often. It's very rare to find like a nice skeleton. Most of what we find are bits and pieces. So it's reasonable to ask, why aren't we just digging somewhere where the skeletons are better? And the answer to that question is that we have a scientific question that we're trying to answer, and we're here to collect data. And that is because this time period, is very poorly known. The dinosaurs that were living in this time period right here, when these rocks were buried, are not well understood. And so even if we don't have beautiful, perfect articulated skeletons, every little bit that we're able to uncover give us a much better picture of what life was like here in North America during this kind of mysterious time period.
Fascinating stuff. Visitors, I'll remind you again, if you've got questions from here, from this point, if you've got questions, wave at me. I'd be happy to start taking visitor questions for Dr. Zano. Just like wave at me. If you're actually down here on the first floor, you can come up on stage. You'll be on camera and in the live stream. You can talk through the microphone directly to Dr. Zano with your questions. If you're up on the balconies, you can just wave down. We can call on you, and then you can yell, and then I'll share your questions into the program. And if you're watching on YouTube, just type and submit your questions into the YouTube chat. I've got that pulled up so that I can share those into the program too. So, Lindsay, you've talked about looking for dinosaurs to help fill in this gap in dinosaur research for this time period that you're in. How far back in time are we when we're looking for dinosaurs in the Menifee Formation?
Well, that's a great question, Chris. And as we talked about last time, we're not just out here just with dinosaur paleontologists. We have a whole team of researchers that work together, and each scientist on the team has their piece of the puzzle to put together. So we had out here last week scientists who study trace fossils. So those are things like the burrows that shrimp make underwater and dinosaur footprints and all of these indicators of the ancient environment. How salty was the water? What types of small, soft-bodied animals were living around. And then we had a faculty member from NC State who does geochemistry out, and he was sampling the rock. And he'll be able to tell us how much rainfall there was and what the seasonal temperature range was. And then we had a geologist out here who specializes in time. And so he was here to date the layers of rock and tell us how old the dinosaurs were that were living here at this time. And then we've got a bunch of paleos here, and we're collecting everything from giant fish vertebrae. The fish were enormous here, to crocodile teeth and turtles. And we have actually tons of really cool plants that we've been finding in that sandstone layer that I told you we've been sawing through. There are beautiful giant leaves and pine cones and all things about the plant life as well. So the answer to your question is we're not exactly sure how old the Menifee is. It's sometime in the late Cretaceous, sometime around the Santonian or Campanian to be specific, but we hope that by the time we come back out next year to dig up that ankylosaur, we'll have some actual dates to be able to pinpoint exactly how old the rock layers here are.
Oh, fascinating. I love that. We have a mystery that we're trying to solve. Right. I'm going to look around the room. Wave at me if you've got anything that you want to know more about as we continue our conversation with Dr. Zano. Lindsay, sort of paint me a picture of digging up, let's say the ankylosaur, since that's what we've been talking about, or this ceratopsian skull you said the team is working on today. What does the work actually look like? What does it feel like to do this work out there?
Well, it's hot and dirty, to be honest with you, Chris. It's not as romantic as people like to make it out to be. So we have our camp kind of in the distance across the valley. It's a remote camp. We have bladders full of water that we bring in. We have no running water. We have no electricity. We have no facilities. And we have coolers full of food. So we cook at camp. Every morning we get up, we make breakfast, we pack our backpacks for the day. They're pretty heavy, you know, they're weighted down with water and plaster and all of our tools. And then we'll hike to the quarry, and we'll spend most of the day just kind of, you know, tapping, either doing hard work like rock sawing or chiseling or fine detailed work to try and get close to the bone and expose the bone in the field. We use consolidants. So these are like, they're basically resins that are dissolved in acetone, and they penetrate inside the bone, and they can keep it from breaking apart. So when we expose a bone in the field, we put this consolidant on it to keep it from breaking. And then we try and make a jacket around it. So you've seen these white plaster jackets. We try and leave it encased in as much rock as we can to protect it. We don't want to expose it too much here in the field because the conditions are not great. And then we'll plaster it and flip that over and carry that back to camp. And so it's long days in the heat, hard work, but it's really exciting because as you're digging, even if you've been digging for a really long time and not finding anything, you never quite know when you flip that next little bit of rock over if there's going to be something really special hiding under there.
I wonder, do you develop a kind of fossil sense for where these things might be the more time that you spend out in the field? Can you look at a hillside and go, I bet there's fossils in there?
Yeah, a little bit. But I mean, I feel like it's a little more superstitious than reality because most of the time when I think this is a really great place, there's definitely going to be something really cool here. There's not. And then the site that the students are working below me, when we had one of those massive rainstorms, I was just kind of hiking quickly out of this area to get back to camp. And that's when I basically like stepped over this site. So sometimes you think you're going to find something really amazing in a beautiful place and there's nothing. And sometimes you're just hurrying back to camp in a hailstorm and you basically step on a dinosaur. So it's really hard to say.
You're trying to get back to camp in a flash flood and you trip over a horned dinosaur.
It's the best. The site is called Stormy Monday, so it gives us good site names, I guess.
That's amazing. I love everything about that. Well, not that you got caught out in a hailstorm. I don't like that, but that you find dinosaurs in the most interesting ways doing this kind of work. Let me throw some questions to you from the chat on YouTube. One of our viewers, Milo, wants to know if you have any plans to study a place called Hall Lake or other sites related to Menifee, I think, that have these gaps in knowledge.
Yeah, we're not going to be working in Hall Lake right now. We've got a lot of sites to tease out right where we are, and we're spread kind of thin. We're doing a lot of field work for this big project that I've been talking about with all these different scientists together, trying to understand life in the Cretaceous. So we're working here in the San Juan Basin. We've been working in the Zuni Basin a little bit. And then, of course, we're working in several places in Utah and also up in Montana right now. So the crew is out basically from mid-May until September-ish or late August. So we got a lot on our plate, and probably we need to finish up some of these areas before we take on anything new.
Another one of our viewers online is curious about some of the other discoveries that you've made, like Siach Microrum. And if you remember, do you remember the discovery day for that one? And what can you tell us about it?
I do remember the discovery day. Back in 2008, I was just a last year PhD student, and I was working with the Field Museum crew in Utah. And that was the first year that we decided to go into the Musentutchet. We'd been working in a different area and not finding anything for weeks, and we were kind of down about it. And we knew that there'd been some fossils found in the Musentutchet, so we thought we'd just check it out. And yeah, we made one of the greatest discoveries, I think, of the coolest animals of the Musentutchet right when we got there. And so even though we've been working the Musentutchet for about, it's a long time now, over 15 years, we've never found another skeleton of Siach. So that was a pretty important discovery that was made right away.
And was Siach one that made its way into, oh no, Moros Intrepidus made its way into the Jurassic World franchise. Is that right? Another one of your discoveries?
Moros made it into the movie, yeah, but there are Siach and Moros action figures from Jurassic World that you can get that are pretty cool too.
Did they make an action figure of you, Dr. Zano?
I hope not. If they do, I don't want to know about it.
So yeah, you mentioned finding other fossils besides dinosaurs, plants, pine cones, fish vertebrates, stuff like that. Are you keeping all of that stuff too, or does that go into a separate pile to deal with later?
Oh, we're bringing all of that back to the museum to study because it's so important. You know, we're not just trying to name new dinosaurs out here. We're trying to understand what Earth was like so that we can understand how Earth responds to changes in temperature, changes in climate. How do animals back in the time of dinosaurs respond to extinction events and immigration events and all of these things? Because this is really the data that we can access to help us understand what's going to happen in our own future. This is an experiment that's already been run. And our job as paleontologists is to collect the data that exists and make sense of it and help interpret what it means so that we can better prepare for our own future. So we're collecting everything we can find that is relevant to understanding what this ancient ecosystem was like.
How long does it take? For example, this ankylosaur or the ceratopsian skull that you tripped over on Monday, how long does it take from the prospecting, discovery, to then, or walk us through the timeline, I guess, digging it up, getting into the museum, learning something new, telling the world about it?
You know, Chris, it takes a really, really long time. That might be the most surprising part of what we do. I have really close colleagues who are geologists who come out here and they collect all their data in a week and they go back, they send it to the lab and they write their paper. And as a dinosaur paleontologist, I kind of marvel at this because if I find something in the first year, like this one, we can't actually do an excavation yet. We can collect what's on the surface. Then we have to go back and apply for an excavation permit. And if we're lucky, we can start excavating a year later. And if we're lucky, within 2 or 3 years, maybe we've excavated everything that's there. And so now you're talking about, that's about year 4. And then all of those bones are still encased in rock in plaster at the museum. And if you visit one of the paleo labs at the museum right now, you can get a sense of how slow the process of cleaning the fossil from the rock is. It can take years just to prepare these bones for study. And then finally, at the end of all that, I get my skeleton that I get to start doing research on. And that research can take a few years. So often when you hear about a new dinosaur in the news, it's been discovered, a decade or so ago, and it's taken that long to get the permits, to get it out of the ground, to get it prepared and get it studied and get it published. So it's a very, very slow process.
That's amazing. Job security, I suppose. 3 people in the audience laughed at that. That's great. Do you get any insights into some of the questions that you have about these ancient ecosystems and change over time in the field? Like, do you look at a skeleton and ever have a moment where, I don't want to say a eureka moment, but maybe that's what I'm thinking of, where you see something that begins to change your perceptions or help formulate what your hypothesis is for study later?
Yeah, I guess so. That does happen. It happens more so with the non-dinosaurs. The fact is that dinosaurs are the biggest thing out here. They take the longest time to excavate, prepare, and study. But when we say find a microsite or we find a plant site, we can collect a lot of data on a lot of different animals very quickly. So you don't get a lot of like dinosaur eureka moments, for example, in the field, but you can get a lot of these contextual moments where you get a much greater understanding of the area you're working from the geology and the environmental side, or even all the other animals that are living around the dinosaur side out here. It's just the dinosaurs that, because they're so big, take so much work.
Are the dinosaurs, though, the most exciting parts? Or do you find it all
I mean, you're asking
exciting?
a dinosaur paleontologist, so that's not very fair. I mean, of course. And, for me, also the theropods are what I love to study the most. And they're very rare animals. Most of what we're finding out here are duckbill, horned dinosaurs. But we have found a fair number of tyrannosaur bits. And then just the other day, we found a few bones of something called an ornithomimid, which is a pretty rare animal out here. So, and it's a new species, but unfortunately there wasn't much there. We just collected a few elements. So we have to keep hunting for these more rare theropod dinosaurs.
There's a question in the chat that I like. How much data do you need from, say, a site like this to answer the questions that you have?
Well, with paleontology, it's always the most data we can get, the better. Unlike a lot of sciences, we're really limited in the amount of data that we have because the fossil record doesn't preserve everything. And so the data that we get is kind of biased, and we have to account for that. We never seem to have as much data as we want. But you can kind of get a sense of, if it takes me 10 years to discover, dig up, prepare, publish on a dinosaur, like the scope of how quickly can we amass that data is a pretty slow process. So we always sort of struggle with not having enough data to answer our questions in paleo. We just do the best we can with the amount of data that we have.
Excellent stuff. I'll remind you, if you're here in the globe with me, just wave at me if you've got a question you'd like to ask. You can tell me and I can use the mic, or you're welcome to come up on stage and be in the show as well and ask your questions. We'll go here first. Sure, go for it. You mentioned rain and mud. How does that affect the process?
Well, we don't want the fossils to get rained on, so we have to kind of, every day when we leave the quarry, we have to prepare everything just in case it rains. So we'll cover everything with tarps and garbage bags. We'll seal everything up. We've got plaster out here. We don't want the plaster to get wet. So I guess it complicates our work a little bit. We just have to kind of prepare for rain all the time, every day, and make sure that everything is protected against rain. But hey, it's a free shower, so rain isn't always a bad thing.
You don't have to use your water bladders in order to take a shower that day, do you?
You don't. And we capture rain for quarry water for making jackets and things too. So that can be really helpful.
Oh, interesting. Awesome. Let's go to the back row. Yeah, come on up. Tell us your name, and then you can ask your questions.
Hi, I'm Abby. I was actually one of the undergrad students that came out to the field. So I just wanted to ask Dr. Zano if you were still working on the foothills, because you were saying that you're going to leave the Ankylosaurus site for probably next year. But if you were still working on the foothills, if you've found anything more there, and also if you found more of those fish scales we were looking for.
Hi, Abby. We closed foothills. We found those 3 metatarsals and 1 beautiful tyrannosaur tooth and nothing else there. So that area is closed. And then, no, we haven't found any more fish scales. It's funny, Chris, people probably think we get really, really excited just about like tyrannosaur fossils, right? But Abby was out in the field and all we wanted to do was find about 12 fish scales, something that's like this big. And we spent hours and hours and hours scouring these sites, and we found maybe like 3 of them. So sometimes the thing that you really want doesn't sound that exciting, but can give you a lot of cool information about the ecosystem. In this case, we want fish scales so we can understand the trophic pyramid of how all the animals were interacting and what was eating what back in the Menifee.
And then I have one more for you. I remember we were collecting amber, but I never really got like a straight answer of what it was for or what we would do with it.
Okay, well, we're going to use the amber for some environmental indicators. So yeah, Chris, there's also a lot of coal layers here in the Menifee. There's 10. We've mapped out 10 different coal beds in this area. And that's really nice because the coal's really extensive, so you can kind of figure out if your dinosaur is between coal 1 and 2 or 6 and 7, and that's going to help us with relating everything in time and space. But within those coals and these plant layers, you often find fossilized sap, which is amber. And we're not looking for insects and we're not trying to find dinosaur DNA in this amber, but we are going to use it to try and understand more about the environment. So we've been collecting that as well.
Thank you so much. If you don't mind, can you say hi to the team for me?
I will. Good to see you.
All right, bye.
That's awesome. So you were in the Menifee just recently doing some work, specifically trying to find fish scales? That was part of it. turtles, fish scales, and other small little things at a microsite. Lindsay, how many? Okay, well, hold on then. How many sites do you open up? You've been out there in New Mexico for like 3 weeks. How many different dig sites will you open up and investigate when you're camping at one of these places?
Oh, it depends, Chris. If the sites, as we're prospecting, we'll try and dig in a little bit and see if the site is promising. And so I'd say we probably poked around at least 10 different sites and dug up bones from about 10 different sites already. And we'll keep doing a fair bit of prospecting before we leave so we can determine what we should focus on next year. But like I said here in the Menifee, you know, sometimes you'll see a couple bones sticking out and you'll think this is going to be a great site. And then as you start to kind of uncover things, there's not that much there because the skeletons were all fallen apart and their bones were scattered really far. So we tend to open a lot of quarries here just to see if there's anything great. And then a lot of them don't pan out. Maybe one or two ends up being a really good site.
Interesting stuff. So how much more time will you be in New Mexico for this field season?
So we have 1 week left. We're here in the Menifee for a month. And then we will pick up some fresh recruits in Albuquerque in about a week. And they will head to the Mustn't Touch It, where we've been working, as I said, for a really long time to work on a couple cool quarries there, including one that's produced a lot of juvenile and baby duckbill bones and theropods and some pretty exciting stuff out in the Mustn't Touch It. So we'll be moving to Utah in just 1 more week.
Do you get a break?
I do. I'm going to come back to the museum for a couple of days, and then I'll be meeting up with the Utah crew later in July.
Okay, so no, not really.
Well, you know, this is kind of my favorite part, Chris. So I'll be out here as much as I possibly can all summer long. And then we'll split at the end of the summer, and half the team will go to Montana, where the dueling dinosaur specimens come from, and half the team will go to Mongolia to the Gobi Desert for about 5 weeks. So we won't wrap up this year until mid-September.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a long field season. One last question for you, I think, Lindsay. Is dinosaur paleontology expensive? Like, is camping out in the field, digging up all this ancient life, getting it back to the museum, is that costly stuff, or is like all the expense in like running the lab here at the museum?
Yeah, I think compared to most scientific enterprises, paleontology fieldwork is not that expensive, right? Once we're out here, we're not spending any money. It's just what it costs to feed the crew basically on site. When we do international trips, though, like our work in the Gobi Desert, that can be fairly expensive because it takes a lot to bring the whole team over there and rent the vehicles and things that we need. So it kind of depends on where you're at. But say compared to a lot of biomedical research or something, paleontology, you get a lot of bang for your buck.
Great stuff. Well, Lindsay, thanks for taking the time out of your workday to hang out with us, chat, answer questions, and update us on what's going on out in New Mexico.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure talking to you, Chris. Wish us luck in our last week. Maybe we'll make that really awesome discovery before we head out.
We've got our fingers crossed for you. We're all wishing you good weather, first off, and then good discoveries.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And yeah, give our best to the rest of the team. And say hello to all the folks who are going to be joining you in the next week when you head elsewhere.
I will. And I think you'll be talking to Lisa and the Utah crew in a couple of weeks after they've had a chance to get set up. So look forward to that.
Yeah, that's right. Saturday, June 28th, we'll be back here in the Daily Planet Theater and back online for the next edition of Dino Dig Live, when we'll get more updates. We'll be at a new site. Yeah, we'll be with other members of the paleo team at different places out west, learning about different research that's going on, because there's a lot going on here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, as you can all see. Well, Lindsay, we'll let you go. Be safe, take care, travel safe as well, and thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody, for coming out and joining today's program. Hope you enjoyed it. And, of course, there's a lot more fun and exciting things happening at your science museum all the time. Make sure you check out naturalsciences.org for updates on programs and events here at the museum. And, of course, you can follow the museum on social media. You can also follow Dr. Lindsay Zano on social media, where she's posting updates about their field work all season long. I believe on Instagram, which is the username ZanoLabLive. I think that's right. So that you can see, I mean, one, just like gorgeous landscape photos too, because these environments are beautiful, but also see some of the cool updates as they happen. Enjoy the rest of your Friday afternoon, everybody. I hope we'll see you again soon. Bye.